Does Ohio State have what it takes to win another top 10 showdown? This one happens to be in the shoe. We answer that question today on Locked on Buckeyes.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is a Locked On crossover between Locked On Nittany Lions and Locked On Buckeyes, and welcome in as it's Penn State, Ohio State. Finally, it is here, the matchup we've all been waiting for. It's a top 10 matchup since the AP wants to slide Penn State down after a 63-0 victory, but that's besides the point. I'm Zach Seyko, and I am joined by Jay Stevens as we are co-hosting this for the Nittany Lions and the Buckeyes. Jay, it is great to catch up again and talk everything Penn State and Ohio State. Now, our episode today is sponsored by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. We got a lot of things to cover here, Jay. Storylines, key matchups. That's the segment I'm most excited for here. And then everyone cares about the predictions and the final score, but we'll save that for last. Storylines, Penn State seems like a trendy underdog in this case. They're 4.5-point favorites, according to Locked On's official sportsbook partner, FanDuel. And the total seems to be around, if you look in different places, about 50 points, 50.5, 51.5. So this is something that's going to be in the neighborhood of, 28, 24, 27, 24. And Vegas thinks that Penn State is going to be on the losing side of it here. But Penn State hasn't beaten Ohio State since 2016. Penn State has had good games, but they don't come out on top against the Buckeyes. So when I look at this game from the bird's eye view, Jay, it's from Penn State's point of view, there's a lot to lose for the Nittany Lions. People are saying this is a career-defining game for James Franklin. Penn State has all the pressure because they haven't beaten the Buckeyes. Like I said, going on 7 years now. So from Ohio State's point of view, I bet they feel pretty good because I don't want to say this deck stack against Penn State. I like Penn State in this matchup. I do. They match up well with Ohio State, but it's the fact of there's more for Penn State to lose than there is for the Buckeyes to lose.
This game from Ohio State's point of view is a very interesting one because it's always circled going into every season. Ohio State, Penn State, when is it? Where is it? What time might the kickoff be? And so this is one that Ohio State players and coaches, I'm sure, know this is a big season, I won't say season-defining win or game, but you will learn a lot about yourself in this game. From Ohio State, though, they have some injuries. We'll touch on those as well. They're still trying to figure things out offensively. We'll touch on that a little bit more. This is a game where the Buckeyes can really show what their identity is offensively if they put things together. Now, injuries and probably needing to play a few more backups than normal, that goes into Ohio State possibly finding out what is their identity. Penn State, though, is one of those schools. I talk to numerous people every week about Ohio State looking ahead to Penn State. People are nervous. Not going to lie to you. I'm nervous as well. But this game is a great game for the Buckeyes to really show what their identity is as a team and kind of cement it and say, this is what we are offensively and defensively. And at our best, can they beat Penn State? I think they can. I don't know if it's going to happen. We'll touch on my thoughts about that later in the show.
The analytics say Penn State is slightly below Ohio State. Ohio State is typically, when I look at the analytics, they're typically in about 5th or 6th place, and Penn State is just about 8th, 9th, 10th. So the gap isn't that far. Now, Penn State's defense is better than Ohio State's, but Ohio State's offense, I think, has a bigger gap than Penn State's. Penn State just hasn't found any traction as far as the explosive plays go. Now, they protect the football very well, and Aller's a big part of that. But Ohio State coming into this one, I want to give credit where credit's due. They've been battle tested. And now Penn State has played Iowa and they played West Virginia. Those are the two toughest teams that they played, even though the Nittany Lions handled them very well. We're seeing that West Virginia is better than advertised. And Iowa could finish 11-1. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. They're punters in the Heisman conversation, right? But it's still UMass and Delaware. And then there's Illinois. Like Penn State hasn't had that Notre Dame game as a real battle test. And I was surprised. I did not think the Buckeyes would beat Notre Dame. I really didn't. And the way they did it, too, in a close defensive struggle. So we might get more of that here, whereas Penn State and Ohio State lit up the scoreboard last season. I could easily – now, I won't say my predictions, but 50 points almost seems like a lot in this case.
Yeah, I think with this game, you're looking at both teams barely eclipsing, to me, getting over the 20-point mark, and that's going to be on the high end for both points because both defenses are not just two of the best in the Big Ten. I know Penn State's is up there, and I think Ohio State's defense is doing a lot of things defensively that are making them one of the better units in the entire country. There are others that are better, but Ohio State's defense is really – to me, I was not sure what to expect from this group going into the season. I think at this point in the season, there are things that they can work on. But if you're giving up, 14 points to Notre Dame, if you're giving up 7 points on the road in really bad conditions at Purdue, Purdue's a bad team. But if you're only giving up 7 points there, that is saying something about you. Only giving up 17 to Maryland. So there were some things that they're doing on the road. 14 points at Notre Dame, 3 at Indiana, 7 at Purdue. Those are all road games. That's odd to me because I thought Ohio State's defense would be giving up 17, 20, 24 points in some of these abnormal contests. They're not doing that right now.
Yeah, they figured it out defensively from a year ago anyway. At least that's when I look at it from far away. I want to know about Kyle McCord. And this, Jay, this is just an interesting, it's just kind of ironic, right? You have Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr., who both went to St. Joe's Prep in the state of Pennsylvania. And they commit to the Buckeyes and were top prospects at the time in the high school recruiting rankings. And they're very good. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a generational talent. Kyle McCord, the jury's still out on how good can he be? How good is he going to be? And then for Penn State to go into Ohio and get the commitments of Drew Aller and Caden Saunders. Now, I know Caden Saunders isn't a starter. I get that. But once upon a time, he was a very highly touted wide receiver, one of the best in the entire state of Ohio. Drew Aller, according to 24/7, was the number one quarterback, and he comes from Ohio. So I just think it's funny that Ohio State goes into Pennsylvania, gets top 2 quarterback wide receiver duo, and then Penn State does it in a different class with Drew Aller and Caden Saunders. But what's the jury on Kyle McCord? He's obviously getting better. He's getting more comfortable in the offense from what I've read, but I think Penn State finally has an advantage in terms of quarterback talent for the first time in a while.
You're saying making those statements, Zach, and people that are watching this show that are Buckeye fans that might get pissed off at you saying, oh, Drew Aller's better than Kyle McCord.
Aller's better than Kyle McCord. Okay, who's going to be a number 1 overall pick when all said and done? Drew Aller has not. Drew Aller is the better talent than Kyle McCord. I am not sorry to say that.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you either. I'm just saying there are going to be people that are like, who is this guy? Where is he? Send him away. And I'm not going to say, no, Zach's really good. Keep him around with locked on Nittany Lions. No, Kyle McCord's one of those guys, and someone else said it, and it made the statement about Kyle McCord, and I think it's true. Ohio State is seeing a true initiation to a new starting quarterback. You had a quarterback competition in the offseason, which trickled into the regular season. Ryan Day made a statement before Game 3 that Kyle McCord is QB1, but what have we seen? We've seen him make some big boy throws, seen him move the offense, seen him do some good things. But even last week on the road at Purdue, we're seeing a quarterback who in game number 6 as a full-time starter this year, he is still having issues making some decisions. And sometimes those decisions could be on 3rd down. Oh, man, bad throw. You're punting the ball. Sometimes those could be on 1st and 10. Then all of a sudden you could be at 2nd and 12 or 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 9 based off some decisions that your quarterback is making. So I do think in this game, some of those decisions that we're seeing from Kyle McCord, they're going to be exposed on a bigger scale because of who you're playing, what's at stake for this game. I think Kyle McCord's a good quarterback. He is a work in progress, but I'm glad Kyle McCord's a quarterback at Ohio State. Ryan Day actually mentioned the Drew Aller recruitment during his press conference on Tuesday. And part of the reason that things didn't go for Drew Aller to come to Ohio State was because of Quinn Ewers. And I'm like, oh, Quinn Ewers is coming back up into the conversation. Now, I don't remember what year he came out, so just forgive me on that. But it's really, I like that Ryan Day acknowledged that, like, hey, like, we already had a guy. Things changed when there was a reclassification, and so things kind of got shuffled and changed there. But I get it, man. Al's a good quarterback. He's playing really good ball this year. And I'm excited to see this quarterback duo. Now, I understand, like, they're not on the field at the same time, but you get Aller on one side. He goes out the field. McCord comes back on. I do think this battle is one that we're going to be talking about as host for a long time.
Aller's recruitment, I don't want to dwell on it a lot here because we do have more important topics to talk about as far as this goes. But Ohio State basically shunned Drew Aller in state. He was a low 3-star. He was a work in progress.
Yeah.
He was definitely a project prospect. And then he blossomed after Ohio State had its priorities. You had Quinn Ewers. There's no shame in that, but don't say, well, it came down to Quinn Ewers and Drew Aller. Drew Aller wasn't in the consideration for the Buckeyes when they were doing their quarterback recruiting. Whereas Mike Yurcich was all along. Found Drew Aller when he was down at Texas and then came up to Penn State and still actively recruited him. And then James Franklin's like, yeah, we're going to trust your judgment here. So Penn State was definitely out in front of that. Ohio State, yeah, you lose Quinn Ewers to the transfer portal, but Ryan Day definitely sugarcoated how that recruitment went. They basically, they offered Drew Aller so late in the cycle. They didn't even offer him. So I'm just going to leave it at that. We got key matchups. We got names to know in this game, in addition to Drew Aller and Kyle McCord. We got some great sponsors that are a part of this episode, and one of them today is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports platform in America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, and it's just you against the numbers. That's all it is. Instead of battling thousands of other players, the pros, the sharks, you just pick more than or less than the stats, the numbers on a 2 to 6 player slate with projections and watch the winnings roll in. It's really simple. All you got to do is make your picks, submit your entry, and you can do this in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And this is an amazing feature. With the Prize Picks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. From NFL games and college football top 25 matchups, if you have a player that exits in the first half and does not return in the second half, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. All you got to do now is go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use promo code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege with promo code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. And the Locked On Podcast Network amps up college football coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time across all the Locked On College YouTube channels. And then you can listen to it back wherever you get your podcast. Jay, have you been a guest on that show yet?
Yes, sir. And that show
imagine so, yeah.
It's an ideal place for college football fans like you and I to get our weekly fix before a fun weekend, a Saturday full of college football.
Everything. You get the storylines like here. You also get predictions, you get the college football playoff implications, conference implications, so much more. Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Check it out across the Locked On Podcast Network college channels on YouTube, and then wherever you get your podcasts, including Nittany Lions and Buckeyes. Subscribe to the channels wherever you get your podcasts for both Locked On Buckeyes and Locked On Nittany Lions. Follow along with myself, Zach Seyko, and Jay Stevens of Locked On Buckeyes. Okay, back into it. Key matchups and names to know. When I think about for Penn State's advantage, the biggest key matchup is it starts in the trenches. It always has. It always will. Penn State's defensive line against an Ohio State offensive line that I think has taken a step back. They are not as sound. They are not as talented as they have been in years past.
No, you're correct. This offensive line is getting better. Nowhere near where they were week 1 or week 2. But they are showing progress and progressing in how they're playing. And I think the coaches, Ryan Day as the offensive play caller, is figuring out what this offensive line is good at. Is it a better gap scheme, running the ball? Is it a better zone scheme, running the ball? But once he figures that out, these guys are moving people. And I went back and actually rewatched part of the Ohio State Notre Dame game today to kind of remind myself what the offensive line was a few weeks ago. And I was kind of amazed in the rewatch today that offensive line that I was very critical of wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Now, it's not what it was a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. Not going to go that far. But they're better than people are saying they are. They're still going to need to play the best game of their lives this Saturday because Penn State's front is real. They got dudes up front. And if Ohio State's O-line's not ready, they could be on their backs. Kyle McCord could be sacked 5 or 6 times. I just want to know. I'm curious. And I watch the trenches all the time. But the Buckeyes O-line, they definitely got to bring their A game because if not, it could be a long night for them.
Another key matchup, and feel free to disagree, but I think you're going to agree here, Jay, is the Kalen King, Marvin Harrison Jr. matchup, or just the secondary, the defensive backfield against Ohio State's wide receivers. And maybe this is where the injury conversation comes up a little bit, because I think this matchup isn't as high profile. Well, it still is, because Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be probably the number 2 overall pick behind Caleb Williams in the 2024 NFL draft. But if Emeka Egbuka is not ready to go, even if he's short of 100%, that's all the benefit for Penn State, because Kalen King and Johnny Dixon has proven to be arguably the best cornerback duo in the country. I'm not afraid to say that. The analytics back it up. And then you have Daquan Hardy. Then you have the emergence of Cam Miller. I'm not saying put 5'9" Daquan Hardy on 6'3" Marvin Harrison Jr., but Penn State won't be overwhelmed with the other matchups as well. But it's still key, because this is Penn State has not faced anybody like Marvin Harrison Jr. Penn State has not faced anybody like Emeka Egbuka. Or I'd even go as far to include the young guys too. Brandon Inniss, Carnell Tate. Now, I know they're not being utilized much as the top 2 names that everybody knows, and Egbuka and Harrison Jr. And then just Ohio State, they're very good at developing wide receivers. I do not like Brian Hartline and what the work that he's done. And then it's still just going on. I hate admitting it. This one stings a little bit, especially because Marvin Harrison Jr. played at St. Joe's Prep in Pennsylvania. That should have been an easier one for Penn State to land. Besides the point. And then Julian Fleming too. Penn State missed out on another in-state prospect. Now, I know Julian Fleming isn't had exactly the college football career that everyone anticipated. That is a stable of wide receivers like any other program, and probably I'd say Washington's the only other comparable one in this sense. So credit where credit's due. I want to try to disrespect the Buckeyes as much as I can, but I also want to be a nuanced person when it comes to this stuff, analyzing the matchup. So Penn State, this is by far and above the toughest test when it comes. So the secondaries look great and is number 1 analytically because they haven't had to face these kinds of wide receiver trios, wide receiver rooms in general. And I'm wondering, are the stats inflated because of that? Because you can shut down an Iowa team that doesn't have a good quarterback, doesn't have any wide receivers that are going to break open, UMass without the talent, Delaware, that kind of thing. Are those numbers inflated here? And is there going to be kind of a regression to the mean in this case? Kalen King's a top cornerback as well. He's not going to go 3, 4, or 5, but there's a very good chance he could be selected in the top 15 in next year's draft. So don't discount that. I hope he shadows him the entire time. That is a key matchup in itself. Harrison Jr. versus Kalen King. Wherever Marvin Harrison Jr. goes, Kalen King better go with him.
You know, I'm right there with you. I am a person that if you have a guy that's like one of the better corners in the country, let's say conference, let's go a little bit lower. One of the better corners in the conference, and he's progressing year over year. Shadow the other team's best receiver. I know you don't normally see that in college. I said it and I last year. It may have been the national championship game of 2020. Over the past few years, I've said that during certain games, and at the time, I think it wasn't Denzel Burke, not 2020. Denzel Burke is one of those guys this year for Ohio State. Let me get back on track here, Zach. That there are games when you go out there, he should shadow the other team's best receiver, no matter where he is. And this is one of those games. If you got a guy on the other side of Penn State, he should shadow him. And this is a game that you mentioned injuries, and I'm going to go through a list of injuries that Ohio State has right now, not just a receiver. Abuka's probably not going to play. Last week, Xavier.
That's good news here. That's
Yeah.
good news on my end.
It's possible that he will. Like Ryan did say, it's not a long-term injury. To me, that generally means a few weeks he's going to be out. We'll see what's going to happen later this week when we get it. Actually, Ryan, they won't announce until 2 hours before kickoff who's going to be able to play and who's not going to.
And Penn State will do the same thing. Yeah.
Great gamesmanship. But Abuka didn't play against Purdue a week ago. Travion Henderson was questionable. Did not go in that game. He was out. Mayan Williams, another running back, he was out. Chip Trainum, another running back. He went down to the game, which would look like it was a concussion. So the Buckeyes are without a few starters, a few backups at running back. Things aren't looking great for them. So when it comes to the receivers that we're talking about now, Fleming's one of them. He's still going to start. Xavier Johnson might get a start. Really, for Penn State, this is perfect for them. You only got one real threat of receiver in Harrison Jr. because Xavier Johnson and Julian Fleming are not the receiving threats at all. That even Cade Stover, the tight end, is in the Buckeyes offense. And so I'm a person I would be so happy if the Buckeyes roll out there and say, Fleming, Johnson, you're not starting. Tate, Ennis, you are. Here's the issue. This is a different kind of game to have someone starting your first career game in college ever. So even though Tate and Ennis, Cardinal Tate, Brandon Ennis, to me are better receivers than Xavier Johnson and Julian Fleming, do you want to roll those guys out there in an environment like this? Even though it's at home, it's a different type of environment. I don't know if that's what you want to do. I would not be shocked, though, Zach, if Cardinal Tate, Brandon Ennis saw the most playing time that they have seen this year as Buckeyes due to the injuries that the Buckeyes have on offense. And also because last week it was clear Fleming and Xavier Johnson could not be relied on to consistently catch the ball. I say that. They both had one drop apiece last week. Harrison Jr. had 3. So I say that, and I understand the numbers a week ago are one way. I understand the conditions. Jr. is different. He's way different than Fleming and Johnson when they are outside as receivers for the Buckeyes.
Those are the two biggest matchups that I have. Of course, you can talk about Kyle McCord against Penn State secondary. Penn State, I think, has the guys like Curtis Jacobs or a Kobe King to match up well with Cade Stover. That's a 50-50 matchup. Yeah. Stover is a very good tight end. Should be, whenever he's drafted, is going to be probably a second or third round pick. I don't think I'm far off by saying that. But those are the two biggest key matchups. Jay, looking at this battle, did we neglect to add anybody else or head-to-head battles from the X's and O's that you think are worth mentioning?
I do. I mentioned the injuries at the running back position for Ohio State. Okay. Henderson, RB1, not sure if he's playing or not. Chip Trainum, my guess is he's not going to play, even if it's for precautionary reasons. Concussions are nothing to play with. Mayan Williams has been dinged up all year. Not sure if he's going to play. The fourth guy in the running back room in the depth chart, Dallin Hayden, to me is a guy that needs to play a lot in this game, but I don't know how much you play him in a matchup like this. So I am watching the rushing in the running game for Ohio State versus the rush defense of Penn State, because that right there alone could decide the game. If the Buckeyes can't run, it could be lights out for them and having a chance to win this game. If they could run a little bit better than they have previously, they can win the game. It's amazing to me, Zach, that Ohio State is undefeated right now with how bad their run game has been so far this year. So to me, I am definitely watching Ohio State's run game versus the Penn State's run defense.
Well, and that's just it. And Penn State's run defense has been better this year, but it's still, you look at the analytics because you need to understand more of the full story. You're playing UMass, you're playing Delaware. Of course, you're going to look good against those teams. And game script dictates it. Iowa's not going to run the football when they're down 31-0.
Yeah, it does.
You have to understand that side of the football game. So Ohio State and Penn State are going to be in the thick of it the entire time. So all cards are on the table of, okay, we can go deep, we can go intermediate, we can go short with the passing attack, we can run the ball more frequently and have a good amount of carries. We're not going to be playing so far from behind. It's going to be a tight battle all the way through. And if Henderson and Mayan Williams are, like I said, like Abuka, short of 100%, that bodes very well for Penn State and honestly strengthens my prediction a little more as we go into the final segment. But Jay has a word from Jace Medical in today's show.
Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jace Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code locked on.
And in this final segment, we are going to give our score predictions, the game flow as well, just how it will all unfold. Again, if you haven't already, become everydayers for both of these shows, Locked On Nittany Lions, Locked On Buckeyes, Locked On Big Ten, all of it, and comment your score prediction. We want to hear from you what your score prediction is. Does Penn State finally break the bad losing streak, or does Ohio State handle it here? I mean, playing in the horseshoe is not easy, but I'll start us off, Jay. I think Penn State wins this one. And if it's because of the injuries and just the bad fortunes here coming into this game, Penn State is 100%. Now, there's some select players like a JB Nelson that's injured. He's not going to be playing in this one. Some other guys that they've lost along the way that are out for the season, like a Smith Vilbert or an Alonzo Ford. But those guys are rotational players. When we're talking about stars, starters, key role players, Daquan Hardy's back. Trey Wallace is back, and Trey Wallace is the key. If Trey Wallace was out of this game, Penn State's passing attack would be an issue, and then Ohio State could sell out for the run a little more, and then this would really be low scoring. So I think Ohio State will be able to drive the football, but when you get inside the red zone, that is where Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams and a better offensive line matter in the case of the Buckeyes. So I think the Buckeyes will settle for a lot of field goals in this game, and Penn State will take the game in the horseshoe. I hope my words don't come back to bite me here. I'm going to go Penn State. It's still going to be very close, and I think it's going to be under that 50-point margin, but just barely, though. Field goals are going to be the name of the game. I'm going to go 27-20. I'm going to go 27-22. I think that Penn State, Ohio State is just, it's going to be a weird number, a wacky number at times, but 27-22 is my final score, Nittany Lions.
Zach, I'm actually changing. No, I'm not going to do that. I am going to do that. I am. Originally, I was on the side of the Buckeyes doing some things in this game offensively. Defense still doing what they have done all year, but ultimately, Penn State just being too good defensively. And then I remembered something I said earlier in this show. Their defense has been so good and better than advertised, better than I thought. And one thing I've said all along about this defense, the defense is winning games for Ohio State. Yes, Notre Dame, Ohio State scored more points than Notre Dame. But the defense is the reason why the Buckeyes offense had an opportunity to score more points than Notre Dame in that night. So originally I was going to change it, but I'm getting a little bit more confident. And honestly, this is going to be kind of shocking. Injuries might play into the Buckeyes' hands. If they have to play number 5, Dallin Hayden, to me, who is the best all-around can be. So far, we haven't seen a lot from him this year, but can be the best all-around running back when it's all said and done. If they have to play him a whole lot more behind this offensive line, I think Dallin Hayden is going to be the right guy for the time for Ohio State to move the ball offensively. I'm still curious in watching Ohio State's run game versus Penn State's run defense. I'm going Ohio State 24, Penn State 21. Still a close game. Still one of those games where the opposition scores more than most of the other schools do against Ohio State. But I'm going Ohio State 24, Penn State 21. And as I say it, I'm a little nervous about this game still, but I'm confident because of the Buckeyes' defense and how well they have played this year.
How many lead changes do you think we're going to get in this game?
Let's see, 3-3, 6-6, something like that eventually. No, you're going to get quite a few, but I say that, but there won't be many points scored.
It's not going to be a shootout now.
No, it won't be. So I was thinking maybe 4 or 5, but even then, that probably won't be the case because you're probably looking at a situation. Both teams score 3 touchdowns. Both teams make all the extra points. Realistically, Ohio State scores a field goal late to win the game, similar to what the Buckeyes had to do against Utah in the Rose Bowl, but that game was a high-scoring affair a couple years ago. I don't think that's going to be the same case as far as the points that are scored, but I do believe both defenses will show the whole country that they are the real deal. I do think the Buckeyes defense is good enough to get the job done. I got a question for you, Zach, not about the prediction.
Yep.
A lot of Ohio State fans are upset this game's at 12 noon.
I was going to bring that up to kind of close the show. Yeah, the big noon kickoff.
I know that Fox occasionally will do big noon, then have their big broadcast, Joe Klatt, Gus Johnson, broadcast a game that's not 12 noon. And to me, the Big Ten, both schools in Fox need to come together and say, look, we get big noon. We understand what's going on. Have an agreement with NBC. This week, we swap it. Ohio State, Penn State should always be a night game to me. I don't care if it's in Penn State or if it's in Columbus. I don't care where the game is played. I think it should always be a night game because these two teams, they're not only going to bring the ratings, it's going to be the best, probably the best game of the day. And I know if you're from in the South, I understand Alabama, Tennessee is this weekend. Miss me with that. Ohio State, Penn State will be the best game of the weekend.
So I'll keep it brief, and the everydayers from my show know this because I've actually brought this up a lot and just how the Big Ten. I've worked with Steve Jones, the voice of Penn State play-by-play on the radio on the Penn State Sports Network, and he's into sports business and sport, like the dollar signs when it comes to all of this and how everything comes together. So I'll keep it brief. Fox knows that they don't have to compete with Alabama, Tennessee in prime time. Anybody in the 3:30 matchup. Penn State, Ohio State is the only. Across the board, they're the only top 25 teams playing at noon. So why try to compete for eyeballs with Alabama and Tennessee when you have no competition in the noon window? And that's the same thing for Penn State, Michigan. Ohio State's probably going to have some more games like that in the near future. It's also a fantasy draft. Fox, CBS, NBC get together and they basically draft the games. So Fox they just in the rotation. I don't think this was the first game that they selected Ohio State, Michigan. There you go. Another big noon kickoff, right?
Yeah.
And they put it in that they have decided and they know there are no other top 25 games. Nobody's going to be watching any other games except Penn State, Ohio State. And that's just the fact of the matter. So from a profile standpoint or a cinematic standpoint, Fox fails. I hate it. It sucks. It's the worst. But from dollar signs and a business strategy, I hate to say it, but Fox knows what they're doing.
Yeah. I understand. I'll make this quick too. I understand the marketing and why they do it.
Yep.
I just don't agree with it. And that's kind of where I've been with this ever since they have promoted Big Noon, their pregame show, and then go right into their big game of the day. I understand it works for them, makes them a lot of money. I just don't like it.
We don't have to like it, though, because it makes at the end of the day, the Fox Corporation gets a few more dollars in their pocket. Like I said, it's strategic. It's not to spite the primetime games, but when you don't have to, instead of splitting the numbers, why not go all in with the new? I agree with it from a business standpoint.
Correct.
I don't agree from it for a storyline and for the memories and everything else. But yeah, football teams agree with it, though. The football teams prefer noon games as opposed to primetime games. Just FYI for anybody. Yeah. Let's conclude it here, Jay. This was a great Locked On crossover. I encourage everyone to subscribe to both shows, both channels on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Jay, I hope my prediction comes true. I know you hope your prediction comes true, but this one will be a lot closer than the way the one turned out last year. I think people will be at the edge of their seat throughout. You're never really going to have a one-sided type of game at any point, but I just think that Penn State, because of some extracurricular circumstances, gets it done, and I know that you think the defense will be able to close it out for the Buckeyes, and we'll see on Saturday for a big noon kickoff in Columbus. Jay, I appreciate. I'm glad we could do this.
Yes, sir. I enjoyed it.